we start, may I please clarify something that was yesterday perhaps not clear enough. It's written on the program that we have lunch, but lunch is here, so you can stay and have lunch here. And yesterday we had the impression that some people didn't get the right information and went away. So if you wish to have lunch here, we will provide it. Okay?
Thank you, and welcome to the fourth session of Atlases in Time symposium here. And we will have again 5 presentations. The first will be by Muehlenhaus, standing here. The second one is a video from Alexander Wolodtschenko. He is ill or sick or in hospital, I guess, can't attend online. Third is from Ihor Doroshenko, who will be online present and answer some questions and comment on his presentation. And the fourth and the fifth people presenting are just in the middle of the room, and we'll hear from them. So the first one is Ian, a good friend of us. He switched from university recently to a commercial company named History, and he will present something about exclusive to collaborative. So it's
thank you.
A good title, and we are
right. It's very vague, right? Thank you everyone for coming. Thank you for those of you online. Hello, Ian Muehlenhaus, and today I'm really excited to talk about my paper today. Actually, an abstract right now, but the paper's been mostly written, and really what it is it's kind of meta. It's kind of out there, but like listening to all these fascinating talks about atlases has only galvanized and centralized my belief in what I'm saying. And I'm really excited to take home some of the things I've learned and incorporate them into the research. What my topic is covering is basically what happens if you get stuck in an administrative university job where you can't play with maps for 3 years, and you also do a lot of reading in quantum science. So it's kind of going to be an interesting ride. And the crux of it is this, that even though we have so much participatory mapping and we've done so much to democratize mapping with things like the open data and also all of these apps that we have in our pockets to help us navigate Barcelona, cartography itself as a discipline is still somewhat kind of exclusive. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, it's just how it is. And what I mean by that is that generally, when we talk about atlases and map design, we're speaking as experts, and we are. Well, maybe I'm not, but most of us in this room, I bow to your expertise. However, there's kind of a gap between, we feed people data, we feed them stories, map stories, visualizations, national atlases, atlases about things that we care about. And sometimes that's lost on people. Sometimes we get really frustrated when we say, for example, and part of this is cultural, where I'm coming from, you know, you lost the election, here's the data. And people say, no, we didn't. And we're like, the science says you lost, the data is here. And people say, no, they didn't. Or with climate change, for example. And what I argue actually is that there's still kind of this firewall, so to speak, where there's the geovisual science that the common people won't probably ever understand. They don't have time or interest in understanding. And then there's also, it's kind of like Latin. The science is the Latin. It gets lost. So if this is getting weird. If the cartographers are the church, and these are the people, they don't understand the Latin necessarily, and we still have kind of a key role here. So what I've been thinking about a lot is, particularly as people, certain parts of the population around the world, for example, refuse to accept data science, scientific ideology, scientific belief. And cartographers and data visualizers often just bang their heads against the wall, creating better visualizations, more visualizations, showing the same evidence over and over, saying, see, how can you not believe that climate change is, you know, caused by carbon emissions, etc. But I think we've been going about it wrong, and I think cartography, and particularly atlases, I'm coming to the conclusion, can play a huge role in not only helping convince people of certain fact-based things, but helping people think like scientifically. And so the question guiding my research moving forward is how can like cartographers better facilitate science-based truth making? And this is where it gets a little quirky. So we'll start with something simple called quantum social science. Just kidding, it's not simple. Quantum science is changing everything we know about the universe, and it's quickly trickling into social science as well. So having read a lot of quantum social science research papers and books in the last few years, I've been thinking about what's going on in society where we are creating more data, better visualizations, completely understandable, and people aren't listening. They're not accepting the facts. And if you look at quantum social science, this is going to be trippy. There's no truth. There's no absolute truth. Okay, there's facts, and science has been a very good system and ideology for answering questions, and that's why we subscribe to science. Hopefully, all of us in this room are scientists. I am. I love science, and I use it to guide my life. But there are also other perspectives, and so one reason that you're seeing division in society, we're talking about, disinformation and all of this, actually has nothing to do with that. It has to do with truth is always perspective based. Okay, so there's science backing this up. Quantum science is trickling in. So everything is relative. But what that means is if you're trying to convince someone that climate change is real, they're not going to hear it with more data necessarily, particularly if they're shaping their perspective and belief is shaped by religion. For example, the idea that God will provide, so we don't need to worry about climate change. No amount of data, no visualization will convince people to change their mind. And so actually, it's kind of a poor way of going about it. However, we can, hopefully, and I think this is where I see the role for atlases and cartography in general, is strategically positioned to get people to start thinking scientifically, to get them to start viewing the world more scientifically so that they're more receptive to fact-based reality, the one I prefer. Now, I don't have much time because this talk's pretty much on a short leash already. But what I would say is, for those of you that say that that's totally crazy, there's no way like that, there isn't a single truth or reality. But you say you're a scientist. GMOs provide a prime example. I think they're banned in Europe, and in the US, the foods are labeled with them. There's no scientific evidence at all that they're bad for people or that they're doing long-term cause. You can go to the literature, you can look at it all. As a scientist, many of us in this room are anti-GMO. So we have another belief system. Perhaps it's ethics, religion, worrying about playing God, that's guiding our decision-making there, not science. So we always have competing ideologies that shape our perspective of the world. And so it's complex. But in general, most of us in this room are probably following scientific belief. So I argue that cartography can play a real bigger role than other disciplines and helping people see science, helping people to start perceiving the world scientifically. And it's not going to be through visuals, it's going to be through changing people's minds by engaging them with maps, like atlases when I was a kid. That's how I fell in love. I was from freezing cold Duluth, Minnesota, where it's like minus 30 Celsius all winter. I played with atlases and I fell in love with looking at charts. But we can engage people, and that's how we're going to change their minds. We have two things going for cartography that other disciplines don't. This is like great if you're playing cards. We have visual. Visual is probably the most universal form of communication, correct? So it's one of the earliest forms. And we are the visual discipline, right? We visualize data. Second, we have spatial. Spatial is something that all of our cognition really derives from spatial relationships. It gets back to the quantum, ironically, right? Because everything is perspective-based. So prepositions or postpositions for my Magyar friends in the crowd. But we start thinking in relation to other things. We study spatial. These two linchpins will actually help us convince humans to think scientifically more than, say, other disciplines like just history, etc. George the Cough, great book. Anyway, so what I argue is we can make all the beautiful visuals we want. And this is really weird because I think I'm in map design, but I'm saying visuals and map design aren't going to cut, right? It's not going to convince people. Another awesome story map or visual of global climate change is not going to change the people's minds that haven't been convinced already, because they're not going to hear it and it's not convincing. It's like, it's not, because they're not receiving, they're not open to the scientific perspective. However, what we can do is start, and if we start engaging them, as I'll show on the next slide, if we start actually letting them participate in science making, kind of citizen science, which we talk about a lot, but literally start participating, they will be more likely to start seeing the world from a scientific perspective. We see this all the time, and it was so awesome this morning, although I was a little worried for you, Eric, when we brought up national atlases, because we started talking about autonomous regions with their atlases, etc., and national atlases. But nationalism, and there's a great book by Michael Bilish, who's called Banal Nationalism. It's about how nationalism actually is a participatory process that we participate in every day. Every country does it. So flags on the street, lapel pins, everything. But it's a participatory process. That's one reason people perceive the world as nations and states. It's not because people tell us to. It's because it's imbued through rituals like this. Religion, of course, has, before nation states, religion was kind of the dominant method of perspective of the world. Religion does the same thing. Here's the funny thing that, that happens. Science has this too, right? We have education. Most of us fell in love with science in school. We had multiple teachers, etc. We realized that we could solve problems using scientific thinking. And that's one reason most of us are tackling the world's problems today using this perspective, because it was engaging. And we fortunately had hopefully teachers or parents or whomever that got us involved thinking like this. But it wasn't something we naturally just learned or something that is natural. It's not natural to perceive the world through scientific lens, any more natural than a nationalist or religious. So how can we start getting people to start engaging people through rituals and basically practice so that they start using maps and start thinking scientifically more? It's not just going to be education because, for example, in America, only 35% of the population goes to college. So that's just not going to cut it. And it's not going to be through higher education alone. So one great way that's taken off all around the world, 5 minutes, great, thanks. I'm on time somehow, this is scary. So one way that's taken off is storytelling, right? There's so many books on it now, etc. And really this has been it took scientists a while to figure this out, honestly. I mean, every type of, kind of ideology or perspective-based reality is built on storytelling, right? The creation stories of every religion, the story of national pride, and often omitting all the horrors that every country has been participated in. And it's really great to see this. It's very effective, but it's more like a Band-Aid. It's more like a technique. It's not a strategy, right? But it's a great way to go. Geovisualization, exploratory geovisualization, in the early 2000s was an awesome technique to build engaging content. There were a couple problems with it though. I mean, it held so much promise and it still does, I think. First of all, it was designed for experts. So it wasn't intuitive, it was never going to be collaborative, or it was never going to gain wide-scale acceptance. But man, was it engaging. You could do parallel bar charts and zip around and see all these things light up, etc. And so you needed education or expertise to use it, but it was a step in the right direction. And again, where cartography really showed its promise. And now interactive atlases. Interactive atlases, of course, are super engaging. They're also generally easy enough for the common population to use. And I'm saying interactive atlases have a huge role too, paper print atlases. But I'm talking about kind of a mobile generation here moving forward. So that's why I'm saying interactive atlases. Also, people can explore the data, etc. The one drawback with this, though, and not a drawback, but the one reason it can't totally probably convince people or get them to think scientifically is it's still a top-down. Remember that first slide where I had the cartographer up here and the people down here? So in a sense, we tell people what they should be interested in, and we visualize it for them, which is often cool. But what if someone wants to visualize UFOs or something and explore that data? Unless there's a UFO atlas, that's not going to happen, or whatever they're interested in. So when I argue that I don't know if it's the next phase, but one thing I'd love to see, and I think it's coming to fruition, is what for lack of a better name, collaborative atlases. And I'm not talking about personal atlases where I map my trip to Madrid, which would be really nice for me. And if I was on Facebook, I could share it with relatives and they'd all like it. What I'm talking about is where people should be able to make atlases as easily as they write a blog today. People love to write blogs, right? Everyone gets on and rants about everything. Well, wouldn't it be great if the person that is a climate skeptic could just upload a CSV like this, or an Excel file, probably because they don't know what a CSV is, and just visualize it and prove to themselves by engaging with the data and interacting with the data on their own that, hey, maybe like I am, like maybe this is a problem, right? Instead of us telling them. So I know I only have a couple of seconds left, but what I would say is envisioning this moving forward, and I have no answers, just ideas right now, but envisioning this moving forward, it would probably have to have three things. Any software that does this, preferably open source. I work for Esri, but only for 3 months, so I can say preferably open source. But what I will say is intuitive and cross-platform. It can't just work on Windows. It can't just work on iPhones. It's got to be something that works across all platforms. Many visualization options with built-in safeguards so people don't just make bad science and bad visualizations that actually are kind of anti-science. And also, it's got to be software that's collaborative and social, because the best way to galvanize and proselytize science is to get people to participate and then share it with other people, right? That's how you get the word of mouth works. And so by creating software that anybody can use, like a second grader up to an adult, that actually lets them play with the data they want, their data will be really huge if we can kind of implement this so that we can make collaborative atlases and people actually participate in science. And that's all I have, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Neil. We have the questions at the end. Presentation. Yeah. Why what? And we're proceeding to the next presenter. Who's not here. It's Alexander Wolodtschenko. He retired from his position at the Technical University of Dresden, but he's still active in the field of the semiotics and also a little bit in atlases. He will tell us something about atlasing as he understands the word. I do not agree with that. Yeah.
Selected part my presentation reflects the development of atlasing as a new interdisciplinary semiotic. The creation, analysis, and collection thematic atlases was put as basic category. In 2006 and 2007, they published two pioneer modules, the semiotic analysis and portrait. It was called semiotics and National Atlas of Hungary, a Carpatho semiotic portrait. In 2008, the creation of students' ubiquitous atlases is started. The auto-cast conference in around this stage was proposed semiotic atlas classification and structural model of atlasing. The first structural model of atlasing included semiotic and apolography more atlasing. The next structural model for atlasing included photoatlasgraphy, photoatlassemiotic, and photoatlastic atlas collection. In 2015, in your section, echo and Carpatho semiotic was the section was available to environmental and cultural opportunities in 2017. Currently, there are about 200 thematic photo essays. Of this, 80% are storytelling photo artists. In 2019, there was started semiotic photo atlas analysis with stories and analysis via visual exploration at the University of California, San Diego, USA. Two cyber cartographic photo atlas reflect the basis of cyber cartography in photography and characterizes a new phase of multidisciplinary cooperation in practice and methodology with geomatic and cartographic research center at Carpatho University, Ottawa, Canada. Professor Fred Taylor is director of this center. The next German-Canadian project includes a photo atlas serial cycle of 4 nations. The project aims to create storytelling and methodical photo atlases dedicated to North American indigenous elder William Command. This slide demonstrates 4 selected monographs of semiotic theory. This slide shows a structure model of addressing a semiotic epistemological methodology. Addressing is a new methodology is based on 4 sections of ethnography, etnosemiotic, ethnohistory, and ethnography or ethnography. Everything has good opportunities for school and university education. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay. So this was the second presentation, and just proceeding to the third one. It's one from Ihor Doroshenko, not yours. It's also a video, but he will comment. He's a collaborator at EFL Leipzig, like Eric Lausanne, colleague of him, and he aims to improve the user interface, visualization also of digital meta-gazetteers.
Hello, everybody. And I would like to talk very now and
Igor, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
Can you also see us?
Yeah, I can see you. Yeah.
Okay. Hi.
Hi.
So please give the presentation and you can comment on this.
But did my presentation work or not?
Yeah, the video worked, yes.
Okay, so I can comment after that, if it's okay.
So should we play the video?
Yeah, please, yeah.
We will present the video with sound now. As before. Okay, here we go.
everybody. I don't know what I mean by, and I would like to talk about Zsombor Nemerkényi, and I think everybody knows what traditional literature is. Basically, a visual recognized names, coordinates, type, and digital literature is basically the same, but in digital literature contains at least three attributes: place name, geographic coordinates, and type. And it allows the digital literature to perform two operations, two functions on place name footprint and on place name type. And of course, just place and communication for crucial roles. There are two communication paradigms with digital literature. First one is application program interface API. It allows basically to communicate computers with each other via packages or vectors. And there is the second one, web interface, and it allows to communicate users with computers. And I would like to talk more about web interface. Mr. Kessler argued most existing user interfaces are bound to fit together here, as we can see pretty good on the example of different. And I would like to compare them and to go through a traditional way to use together here and to find a place in the together. So we have two options to search. And this together here, the first one is simple search and the second one is advanced search. And the first one is required to find the place name, and advanced search can be used. So we'd like to restrict the search. In a simple search, in Go, for example, with only input field and search button, to input place name, start the search, and then GNN will also one filter option to filter the search button. And for the search, start with the database, match again the right place name and result. And in advanced search, it's very different, and it varies from literature to literature, how it looks like, what kind of options are provided. For example, in GNN, we have in the feature class continent, you can filter by feature class and continent, to apply further search to find similar placements to what we require. And in Go, there are much more options to restrict there. And results are presented also in different ways. In Go, and you can do both of them simultaneously. And results from in the math, there are different representations. Markers and markers clusters is too much markers, too many markers in one place. And there are also interactive possibilities. For example, if you use a click on a marker, you get place name about the marker and table view and scroll on the table. And vice versa, if you use a mouse over, for example, on the entity in the table, markers in the map will change color. But if marker is clustered, the marker won't change color, and user won't get information where exactly with this marker on the map is. And in GNN, the user has the possibility to go only with the table or only with the map or with both. So with the possibility to combine maps in the table, but in my personal opinion, it's not really user friendly, because map every table is not really cannot really even solve all the user can work with table, field of table, and with the map. And interactive possibility is restricted, so user can click on the mark and get additional information, but it won't be crossed to the table, for example. Meta-gazetteer is kind of other level of gazetteer. It's kind of gazetteer combined other gazetteer, and there are specific challenges for the UI of such gazetteer, meta-gazetteer. For example, the user interface will be beautiful, independent of integrated gazetteer. No matter how they look like, in meta-gazetteer should be all the same, and integration should integrate also functionality. For example, in one gazetteer it allows to use the white, in the other not, but the functionalities should be also provided for the user in this meta-gazetteer. For example, Go provide one specific filter option and general provide other. It should be all. Everything should be combined. Everything should be combined in the meta-gazetteer. And the complexity should be hidden from the data with all the details. Of course, you should have possibility to get original source data. I would like to talk about meta-gazetteer on the example of meta-gazetteer application. We developed a Slavic Institute for Regional Geography, and the schema this has pretty traditional contained of three elements: external services, our server backend and front end. And if the user starts search and front end, the external services are via our server, for example, Gmail and Cloud Live. So we get the entity live via our server and show them the result in time. We have opened up store in our server, so we have that and API, sorry. And it happens via REST infrastructure. And I would like to demonstrate the user interface of the application. Let's get it here. And it looks like that. So we have the search area. We can show it. We have place name field, of course. It's required to type the place name field, and we can restrict the search in one specific area. In the bounding box, the field can be corrected. What you want to search, where. There are also other options to restrict the search. For example, if the user wants to get on the populated place or not. And I would like to search for them. And to the right, we get the result. They are grouped by gazetteer, and the interactive element, so the interaction happens both ways. So from the map to the table, you click on the marker. The marker is kind of the gazetteer is allowed to be do this call to the entity in the table, and if you mouse over the entity in the table, so the marker on the map will change its color. And also if the marker cluster is different to the golf, for example, and we can see where the marker, which cluster. And the user will have also possibility to compare some entities. For example, if we would think that one entity is similar to the other, we can just compare them to analyze how similar they are. And our compare tool, we can just see and compare the entities to basic attributes using the addition. So I have to come to conclusion because I don't have much time. Unfortunately, interface is very important. Part of communication is together. There are two communication paradigms in web interfaces. So about together, and there are challenges related to integration of multiple gazetteers and meta-gazetteer. For example, the meta-gazetteer combine all the functionalities of the gazetteer and all the interface. Interactivity is the most important interaction with the example. Here are my references, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ihor. We will have the questions afterwards. After all 5 presentations, there are 2 left. So the next presentation, we are just in time. Yes, is Zsombor Nemerkényi, if I pronounce it right, more or less. And now he's presenting the interactive version of the Atlas, National Atlas of Hungary. I think it's well, not only part that was presented in the morning, but also about society.
The chair, the audience here in the room, and also on the web. Thank you very much that I could be here and present for you the new National Atlas of Hungary, not only in printed version, but also an interactive version. So there is some mistake regarding the fonts, because I edited with another fonts. So maybe some label or some written parts in my presentation will change its location, but it would be clear. And the most important thing is or available at the web. So this is not the logo of our institute. I mean the QR code and not my QR code for my COVID passport. This is where you can check our job and our National Atlas. I would like to predict that there will no talk about using the system, where to click, when to click, how can you reach some function, but neither do any words what kind of bugs were found during the installation or the details of the visual elements. Everyone should discover by themselves, because it's a kind of joy or a roller coaster. You have to probe it. So after the presentation, of course, please do it. So we have already heard some word about the most recent edition, of course, the printed version. Now I would like to say just a few words about the background of the project. The project promoter is the well-known, till this afternoon, well-known Geographical Institute of the Research Center for Astronomy and Earth Sciences. The project ran in strategic coordination, of course, the Geographical Institute, and with the main professional supporting from the Department of Cartography and Geoinformatics from Budapest, from the Eötvös Loránd University, and with several research institutions from the Hungarian Academy of Sciences, and also external centers like the Hungarian Central Statistical Office. The implementation of the project is supported as a public activity by the government, by the central budget, through the parent institution. This is why you can find the forwards from Prime Minister and from President of the Hungarian Central Statistical Office, and also from President of the Research Network, of course. So, as it was mentioned, it will have 4 volumes. We have already 2 printed volumes, the natural environment and the society. And the next one will be Hungary and its place in the world. And the last one will be the economy. It will be edited. The editorial board of the volume was formed along with the designation of the subject to be covered and invitated of representatives of the respective scientific fields. And some words about the web application. It's also a project of the research center. It's regarding the contributors and the editorial boards, they are quite similar the hard copy, and the electronic version of the society volume of the National Atlas of Hungary was made also with the support of the government of Hungary. And this is the first picture or slide when you get in the emna.hu /en. This is the first page. This is the welcome page. Here you can select whether you want to browse the hard copy or the interactive version. We have to make a distinction between the online and the interactive version. The printed version is not limited to hard copy. It is still a view-only version, but more than a printed atlas. The complete printable PDF files are also available online. So we couldn't write that online version on the other button because it would have been misleading, of course. The term interactive covers the reality. And the question that for whom is it prepared? For every educated, ordinary readers who are interested in the social and natural relations of our country. And what does it show? The thematic cartography content of Society volume has more than 300 thematic maps. So, and only maps. We don't have multimedia contents. It's not a primary goal of our project, which would spread attention from the essence. There are no long text descriptions and photographs, etc., etc. They are in the PDF version, which is also downloadable from the printed after click on the printed version. So, what happened? After the printing version is chosen, there you find static background descriptions about the project, but also leads to the indexed PDF. So the content is indexed in the PDF file. You can search and reach every title very easily that have been published so far. And the other, yes, here is an example or a preview of the interactive version, which is more of an application with data analysis capabilities than a nicely visualized and designed map. Of course, like data query or analyzing by yourselves. And here is an example to look what kind of difference is between the maps in the printed and between the interactive version. In the printed volume, there are 336 maps or titles we can mention. After an examination, we studied and tested these maps, and we selected 284 titles what can be transferred to the web environment, so that we can really add value to aesthetic appearance in the paper. In this interactive environment, the selected 284 titles already make available more than 300, exactly 324 map themes. Yes, it's more than I mentioned before, because there are more titles that deal with an absolute majority, for example, language or religion. So we can say these maps are not quantitative, but qualitative maps. Meanwhile, each quality group can already be also classified according to the number of the distinct category. So it can be further divided onto more maps in the digital version. Yeah. Let's say a few words about the key features of the interactive version versus view-only maps. Without any deep insight into the cartographical methods, I don't want to bother you. First, we have to have a look on the view-only pages. They are designed on the left-hand side and graphically edited maps prepared for printing. It's hopefully very clear, but not more. You cannot do any analyzing by yourselves. The first and one of the most common examples for thematic map types and techniques may be the Coropnet maps. Coropnet map, yeah, all of us hopefully we know that is a thematic map where geographic regions are colored, shaded, or patterned in relation to a value. Type of these maps is useful when visualizing a variable only one variable, and how it changes across defined regions or geopolitical areas. For example, a color path map is extremely useful when looking at population change in a selected administrative unit. In a color path map, color can be used to represent distinct attributes, or, as in this example, to represent the average annual population growth rate and its exact value in the interactive version. Yes, and in contrast, at the right-hand side, the main achievement in the interactive version is that we can access to the exact value of the selected unit. If you pick one administrative unit, you can get the exact value. It's very small there, but you can check. In this stage of the system development project, we cannot display two different themes simultaneously. Maybe in the future we will do this. We will make some development. But nevertheless, we have some maps that represents two variables on the same map. It's some trick from us. On this map, the colors mean a qualitative theme. Here, the categories of the employees by sectors, and there are the diagrams for number of employees also. So it's two another things. It is also possible to vary individual values in the interactive version if you click on an administrative unit. And further, this feature is much more relevant when we take a view on a map where the legend contains more categories, for example, linguistic maps. If you click on the map, exact thematic data of an administrative unit can also be displayed. In the case of data displayed in a diagram, each category can be turned on and off as desired. Yeah. And further on, you can not only switch on and off of a selected category, but you can also customize by yourself the legend. If we take a map showing a quantitative theme, like femininity index, yes, this is femininity index, we can change the visualization according to our needs to have the interpretation of the data. In this case, the femininity index don't say too much for us. We could classify it for visualization that all the categories look nice, but nothing more. This is the same categories what appeared in the paper one. But if we change or choose another statistical method like equal intervals, a spatial structure can be recognized as in the more populated towns of the countries are more females than males. Yeah, it's important, but for somebody. And if we change the number of categories up to 6, then we can have a look at villages with less male or less female than male. This is not a Nobel Prize discovery, but it is certainly an important opportunity to see the correlation within the data. If you take another map showing a quality theme, we can highlight or emphasize it by changing the color of the selected category, even if that categories disappear behind the larger categories. And by clicking on the name of the categories, you may hide or show them from showing up on the diagram. So it's quite useful for some kind of experts. And one of more and maybe last example with the availability maps for the nearest grammar school or the nearest hospital. Not many conclusions can be drawn with the default settings. Okay, the county seats are visible and well infrastructured, but what about with the others? Here, if we set the minimum distance from 0 up to 20 kilometers of the nearest grammar school or hospital, etc., etc. We highlight the marginated location. And if we switch on the county boundaries and also the road networks and maybe the terrain with hill shading, for example, the conclusion can be found easily for the experts. So here I would like to say thank you all of the contributors, all of the participating institutions and colleagues for their helps these huge works. But from this position, maybe for RCA and for the recognition that the Atlas was awarded at the Tokyo and also at Florence conference. We are very proud, and in the same time we are appreciated for these prizes and awards. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Zsombor. See to the last speaker of this session will be Patrik Tátrai, and he will give us insight of another toponymy topic about nationalization of place names. And he is comparing the use of the toponymy in the two atlases, I guess.
Thank you very much. I will continue to deal with the National Atlas of Hungary, but from a, I think, totally different approach, because I apply a critical approach to understand the toponymy, the background of the toponymy, why these toponymy were used. Okay, so my starting point is critical cartographies and critical toponymies, because according to the critical approach, map is a text transmitting different narratives to the reader of the map. Of course. These are, of course, not explicit narratives, but the reader faces these narratives when reading the maps. What kind of information I talk about? It is the author's intention with the map, and of course the map transmit information about the time and place of creation of the maps. With these informations, the maps serve the political orientation of the reader by providing specific information. For example, such information can be borders, place names, and I'm going to talk about place names, and of course about, in general, power relations. Critical toponymy also says similar things, and it claims that power relations are inherent in geographical naming. So I will also talk about the relations between power and naming process. Some words about multi-ethnic regions, which are extremely interesting, I think, when talking about toponymy. So ethnically and culturally diverse regions like Central and Eastern Europe, or like the narrower region, the Carpatho Pannonian area, often witness power struggles along the ethnic or the linguistic boundaries, thus displaying mono or multilingual place names and other geographical names. Can result in political debates and often used as a tool for nation building and nationalizing policies. As Momoni put it, place names not only make anonymous locations significant elements of the cultural landscape, but also offer strong suggestions about the region's character and ethnic allegiance. So place names, and especially minority toponyms or other non-official names, carry strong symbolic power on maps, and this is very important from my point of view, that minority toponyms are in the focus of political struggles in this region. Yes, and in that context, geographical names are far outreach the level of cartography and embedded into national or international political discourses on sovereignty, minority politics, and other issues. So based on that, my objectives, I have two objectives. The first is to compare the toponymic strategies of two atlases covering similar regions, the so-called Carpatho-Pannonian area. Gertrude Gabriel the morning already introduced this area, so I'm lucky that I can skip the introduction. And to identify the ways and logic of how place names are used by the atlases, and I will focus only on areas outside Hungary, outside present-day Hungary, and focusing only the names of populated places, so no other geographical names, and the political ideologies and practical cartographic reasons behind it. So, which are the atlases I mentioned? The first is the ethnic map of the Carpatho-Pannonian area, and it has 3 editions. And the second is the National Atlas of Hungary, the second volume, the Society, and the Hungarian edition, the English edition, the interactive edition. So I analyze altogether 7 versions if we separate the English and Hungarian versions in these atlases. You can see how we can reach these maps or atlases in the online world. So these are the links. And one more very important information, that the ethnic atlas, the ethnic map of the Carpatho-Pannonian area, is considered to be an antecedent of the National Atlas of Hungary, and both atlases were edited by the same editor-in-chief. Okay, just a few words about the Carpatho-Pannonian area. So still there are significant Hungarian communities who still use their minority toponymy, their names, and due to the history and geopolitical relations, competing nationalism is characterized or is a main characteristics of the interethnic international relations. And so that result, we see parallel existence of official and minority place names in large areas inhabited by more than one ethnic group. Okay, starting with the ethnic map of the Carpatho-Pannonian area. This is a bilingual atlas, Hungarian and English, covering almost all regions where autochthonous Hungarian communities live. You can see here, I will not read, the main rule of rendering place names, the first edition, 2012. So the main rule was to render the official name at first, and second, minority name if the minority gets up to 10% or 5%. It's important, 5%. If the local community, local minority community counts at least 1,000 persons. After the publication of this first edition, of course, this book was offered for the political decision makers, and soon they realized that this threshold means that Hungarian names of cities with low proportion of ethnic Hungarians are absent from the map. For example, Bratislava, the Slovak capital, but once it was Hungarian capital, the capital of the Kingdom of Hungary, or other important towns from historical point of view, like Alba Iulia in Romania, which was once the seat of the bishopry of the Roman Catholic Church in Transylvania, and in the medieval Hungarian kingdom, it was a very important city. Or the German town, founded by the Saxons in South Transylvania, Sibiu. So none of these cities were written in Hungarian in the first edition. So after that, the second and the third edition came out, financed by the government. And what happened, the rule or the methodology changed slightly, and this 5% threshold was decreased to 3% in order to put these Hungarian names. Funny thing, what happened in the meantime? You can see that in the second and third edition, there are the Hungarian name of Bratislava, Alba Iulia, Sibiu as well, and appeared some more name, Turkish name of Vienna, Croatian name, because the share of Turkish is quite high in Vienna. But these names, Hungarian and Croatian name, reflects, I think, the history, or maybe the history of the region, because in Vienna, the share of Hungarians is quite low, so lower than 3%. But furthermore, in Alba Iulia, so the first edition came out in 2012, but in the meantime, the census result of the 2011 censuses came out, and the share and number of Hungarian dropped down in case of Alba Iulia below 1,000 people and below 3%. So none of the criteria is satisfied, let's say. But still, you see the Hungarian name, and furthermore, the red color, orange color of representing Hungarians was merged into the other category, because the proportion was so low that from cartographic point of view, it was the logic situation. But the decision to put Hungarian names was before the results came out. So let's say inconsistencies are seen in this map. The same applies to Sibiu, Nagyszeben, or Hermannstadt in German. And one could think about what about the local use of the names, because, for example, in Sibiu, you can see that local community put the German name, but there is no Hungarian name in the town sign, and you can see the ethnic proportions. Hungarians make up 1.5%. Germans share is even less. Okay, so we can identify ethnic, historic, and other maybe cultural heritage reasons for rendering place names, but these principles are confusing and reflecting the political pressure, political influence. And there are still some open questions. What about the Roman toponymy? 5 minutes, thank you. What about the Roman toponymy? Because in many settlements, the share of Roma population exceeds 10%, but we don't have written forms of Roma toponymy, and the whole issue reflects the ethnic hierarchy. So Roma are still in a position position that they cannot articulate their interest, their names. And other questions refers to minority toponymy because there are inconsistencies between the Atlas toponymy and the local use of place names. I mean, place names used by local Hungarians, and other often used sources like Google Maps and Wikipedia. So, going on towards the National Atlas of Hungary, this is the Hungarian version, where the general rule of rendering place name was, in fact, so in the preface we find only a few mention or there are no clear methodology on toponymy. We only know that the main rule, everything is in Hungarian, where Hungarian name exists. Where no Hungarian name exists, we find official names, transcription of Syrian names according to the Hungarian spelling. And we see some differences among those territories once belonged to the Hungarian kingdom. Therefore, the toponyms used to be endonyms once, and this is the border of Transylvania and the rest of Romania. And places where Hungarian names are exonyms, clear exonyms. But in these places, some names, as Gercsa Gábor already mentions, are hardly known by most of the people. So Argyes, the Hungarian version is Argyes, Argyas, or Tergoviste in Hungarian, Tergoviste. I think no Hungarian knows these names. So I know that these are part of the Hungarian heritage, Hungarian toponymic heritage, but from practical point of view, I have doubts with this toponymy. Okay, regarding the English version, the rule is quite different and similar to what we see in the ethnic map. There is the 10% threshold, but this is true only for the Hungarian minorities. So other minorities' names are absent from the map completely. And of course, if there is an English name, it is the first one. So, but we find only Vienna, Bucharest, and very few names. You can see the English version here, and you can see bilingual names mostly here where Hungarians live. So St. Georgia, Szent György, and other. But it's very, very spectacular is the asymmetry between the two versions. The bilingualism in the English edition and the monolingualism in the Hungarian version. Okay, and as I don't have too much time, I just a few words about the interactive version, where I call attention on the base map. This is the Hungarian one, this is the English one. Even the base map is exclusively Hungarian, here exclusively the official names. And if you click one of the settlements, you see here only the Hungarian name, the Hungarian version. If the Hungarian share is above 10%, here is the 25%. And you see the official name here, and in bracket the Hungarian one in the English version. So it's quite quite similar to the printed version. Okay, so now let's go to the conclusions that we have learned from these experiences. So as I mentioned, although the use of Hungarian minority place names as part of the Hungarian toponymic heritage is not necessarily part of nationalizing politics, the context of the atlases suggests that the toponymy follows rather nationalizing patterns and reflect the Hungarian viewpoint exclusively. I think of that the Hungarian version is purely monolingual, no bilingualism where other ethnic groups share exceed 10%, while in English it is different. Regarding the ethnic atlas, the first edition has clear methodology with few inconsistencies, but due to the political pressure, the second and third edition contains a lot of inconsistencies where both ethnic, historic, and cultural principles are applied, but we don't know clearly the main principle. In the National Atlas of Hungary, I think it is a double talk purely that we see between the Hungarian and the English version. There is a lot of disjuncture between the two versions. Or I can tell you that these versions hardly overlap, taking into account the toponymy only. So there is a different talk for the Hungarian readers, for the in-group, and different for the outside world. But this is not necessarily intended, so it's not a purely a nationalizing result of nationalizing policy. It has several other reasons, like, for example, scale and technical framework in case of the interactive version. And finally, the second slide about conclusions. I claim, or I argue, that despite the relatively clear principles behind the use of place names, the Atlas's toponymy can be understood as an unintended and inseparable mix of ethnic indicator, cultural heritage, political performance, and practical instrument. From this point of view, the use of place names in the Atlases under study is inseparable from contemporary social and political conditions of Hungary, and provides almost mutually exclusive narratives about the same area. Thank you very much.
Presentation, and now the floor is open for questions. For all of the 5 presenters in this section. Yeah, please.
I have a question for the last speaker. Is there, who told us there is a political influence has been in correcting the older version of the Atlas and both versions? Was there any? I was not sure if I understood right. Was there actually political pressure, or did the authors just think they felt pressure? Was there active political pressure, or was there not?
Question wasn't very valid. It's a big question to the editor. We received the first edition. Change it, what we would like to see. I don't know exactly how it will. I see that, but it was clear that the values from the government at time without prefer these foreign national rights. I think that was a higher question, but I'm not sure.
The question was that there was a pressure on the editors to change in this minority definition, and Patrik answered, we don't know, but it could be.
They did not have visible consequences for anybody.
Yeah, no.
No, but that is no consequences.
Yeah, but there were no consequences. Okay, another question? Thomas?
Question to Ian.
Question to Ian.
Thank you very much for your excellent and inspiring talk. I've been working for 22 years with statistics now. Shared very much the same problem findings slides. So I'm on constant mission to convince people to data, public data, and hopefully decisions on it. My question is, my biggest challenge is not to convince, from my experience, not to convince users of seeing and using graphics and maps. We do a lot of storytelling, say, well received, thousands of downloads. My biggest challenge is my statisticians or to use that. Because they think we blur or we pollute their data a little bit of visualization style. So how can we bring content literacy or visual literacy into our own community?
The question is from the statistic point of view, how to bring more knowledge to people that produce statistics to accept that they can be published in a way that's perhaps not true.
Yeah, I think, funny because it's kind of, some scientists are data tell-offs. It speaks for itself. So I don't really have a good answer except you could use yeah, that is a big issue because I see it dying down. And that actually would just say streamers become, because if your goal is to institute change for the common good, well, it's important and so you're right, it's kind of a double-edged sword. You're fighting against data scientists that don't like visualization, and think that people aren't rigorous enough to sell in their analysis or whatever. And then you're also dealing with conflict that it's not receptive to it anyway. It's kind of like saying you should buy this. I don't know if they do that in Europe. They're not. But they don't backwards. But they it makes you not only not want to, it makes you want to. So I have no answer, but I'm happy to discuss it.
Ian says that he has no answer, but it's an interesting question. Perhaps we can transform this also to all kinds of scientists, so that they have to be active users and active promoters of what they do, so that it's really visible what they do, and they are not keeping their results for themselves until they are double checked or whatever. So that there is a discussion going on. Eric?
This is a very positive. Truthful data.
No, this is fine.
And the scientists know how to recognize. What about politics? Or how can they incorporate yeah, politics? Or they point their object.
Yeah. The question. Okay, so the question is, how can we visualize also qualitative information and not only quantitative information, so that people get the point, so the message.
And I'll stand just
Come over here.
So, first of all, my background is qualitative human geography, so I totally appreciate that. And I think actually that the qualitative aspects people are more interested in. People blog about and post pictures about and think story maps. And I've never used story maps, but basically it's qualitative. And I think qualitative is something that science should embrace more, storytelling and visualizations, because actually qualitative is how we interpret life. Most of us don't go through life thinking, oh, it's 46 degrees right now, moderate, it's cold. So I think I'm not a positivist by any stretch here. And in fact, I would say that qualitative observation from these other. I'm not really answering your question there either, but I love the discussion and hopefully galvanize.
So, there's a lot of discussion about that, but the qualitative data is, of course, interesting, more interesting for people who also can interpret them a lot of ways, let's say, and then the discussion will go on, and perhaps we'll find a solution that come together. Okay, Peter?
I was very glad to hear that you were emphasizing one part of it. Then basically sometimes only regarding the things. I see that the story can be a feature in one. But that story certainly make it interested in confidence. But on the other hand, when it's an episode, basically, by your guide, and of course, have your own thoughts and sleeping, but the next on many years, yeah, kind of me.
So the question, let me repeat the question for the audience. The question is from Peter was to Ian, whether storytelling, he mentioned in opinion of Peter, is a little bit just friendly for a friend. And this, in his opinion, this could be a narrow view of the data presented and also of the story told. And map, in his opinion, is more open to every kind of things. So, your answer.
Yeah, so stories have often been used to guide me, right? National stories, particularly America, manifest destiny, every country has a religion and creation stories. So yeah, they guide people for sure, and they can be used for good or bad. So, but I think so, and I do think it's a bad. I really do. And now it's like everything. So I agree with you. But I would say the power of stories is people like to be guided, and in fact, you can't. People are less engaged, right? So if you have an open, I'm going to use video game examples because I've seen enough young people play video games maybe. If you have an open universe with no plot or no story, you won't play the game. Boring, right? And I think if you just give someone a map, any and maybe you can even spell out, okay, I'm biased, I'm building, I think National Atlas do. Like I presume the National Atlas of Hungary is promoting Hungary. Right? It's not even said. But if you just give someone a map, they can explore it, and that's fine. But it might not be as engaging, or it might not. And I think that's the power of story to shape a message, but it can be used for bad or stuff. And the good and bad is all perspective based.
So the answer of Ian was that stories are normally used to guide people. And if there's no story, and for instance in a video game, so it's boring. So there has to be a story, but the story can in my opinion, also can guide people to interesting places or to interesting data within the map, which were never detected or never grasped when you look at the map itself. So imagine you have a time series, and then if you only see the first map of this time series and not the whole. Even if you see the whole, you won't grasp every information that's in this map. So it's also kind of tool of guidance, to interesting, to novelty, to serendipity. Let's say, yeah, in this respect. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe a better example would be like a James Joyce novel versus something like, if you have a novel without much direction, rewrite, very few people are going to be good novel. You end up very, so I think there's room. I think
That's what I want to say also to conclude the session. We should use both of them, not only storytelling, but storytelling with maps. So included into the maps or parallel to the maps. So just as an example, to get people more involved in maps, more immersive in the maps, so that they can also have some ideas what was in the history behind and so on. Okay, then we conclude this session, and I thank you for your attention, also the audience online. And Andres is saying something, or telling me something about the lunch.
Yeah, organization, yes. In terms of having lunch now, please bear in mind that you can stay here for lunch. And then in the afternoon, we will have, again, two guided tours, one to the National Library and the other one to the Geographic Centre of the New Spanish Army. So if anyone is still interested in taking part, there is still room for you. And then tomorrow morning, there will be a guided tour to the headquarters of the Institute. However, it will not take place here. We shall meet at this building just beside, which is a new building where it's written Casa del Mapa, so House of Maps. Inside that building, there is an exhibition. So we shall meet there tomorrow at 9 o'clock. And then tomorrow, during coffee break, we are preparing to have a photograph of us. So if anyone is planning to go to the hairdresser, today is the day. I will go, yes. Okay, so any questions? Let's go for lunch then.